Hi, I'm Robert Weaver. I'm the director and neuropsychologist at the Weaver Center. And I have gotten a bunch of questions recently about team meetings and how to be effective in them. They can be very overwhelming for a parent or parents. Um, Many like to have an advocate there, at least even if it's not a professional advocate, to just hear and take notes. It's always good to have a professional advocate there if you suspect that there's any potential conflict about anything, and you should find an advocate that's very knowledgeable, but not confrontational. This needs to feel like a team meeting, like everyone is working for the child, and to stay very child focused. It's the best way to advocate, and it's the best way for schools and parents and teachers and whatever outside services one might have to work together for your student and child. So the first thing that's very important is it's important if you have a child that's on a special education plan or an accommodation plan, is that you keep all of your records in a 3-ring or some sort of binder, that it has the reports in it, it has notes from the team meetings, it has all of the IEPs in it, certainly any testing reports, comments or grades, and also all the emails that might go back and forth. This is one of the hardest things because it takes time, of course. But I can tell you that the folks that we work with and we help become very effective advocates. It's one of the most important things. And you bring it to the team meeting and you have it as reference. So the first thing that you need to have in the notebook or in terms of your preparation is 3 different documents that you should be familiar with. And not only familiar with, but if there's anything that you don't understand, wording or phrases or what something means, it's very important in a team meeting to say you've got several questions and you'd really like to have them answered because you don't understand them. You want to understand them for your child so that as your child is reviewing the IEP, which we highly recommended doing, but it's very good to be able to have a very clear knowledge of what's on the IEP. So the first item is the IEP. So very important to understand what the disability is. That's usually on the first couple of pages. I actually have one here that I thought I would use as an example. What's the disability? The second part that's very, very important is referred to as how does the disability affect the progress of the in the curriculum areas. Now, states are going to have different IEP or individual educational plans or special services plans, documents and regulations, but they all have to follow the basis of at least the federal guidelines to do this. So even though these areas might be termed differently, you can find the same things in all of the reports. And for example, this person says that the student's disability affects progress in the general curriculum as follows. Specific learning disability makes it more difficult for her to effectively process information that is presented auditorily than when it is presented visually. This impacts her capacity to process information in the classroom setting, in that she may take additional time and require additional supports to grasp a new concept, particularly when it is abstract and when she is presented with a great deal of information at the same time. When this happens, this student can become very overwhelmed. This student has relative weaknesses in working memory, causing her to be less efficient in holding and manipulating information in her mind. These weaknesses make it more difficult for her to generate abstract ideas in a fluent, efficient manner and to follow complex directions. I use alarms for almost everything. In addition, they can interfere with her ability to express herself clearly and accurately. This is a very good, of course, this is one of the Weaver Center products, but it's very important to articulate how things are going to affect each and every class so that you are able to refer to this in the classroom and ask questions relative to how is someone's process. I mean, how do you find them to be able to hear and understand what you're saying? Especially, how fast do you speak? Are you sure that she's getting the information that she needs? Do you have visual things? It said there was visual strengths. Are there visual pages or notes that you have in front of this student, especially before the class begins, so that maybe she or he could write notes on it? But to have what kind of visual supports, because that's a strength of. So those are the importance of kind of knowing that section. Secondly, it's important to go through and know the goals written down on each of the goals that are for the student, and also the listing of accommodations. It's really important to go over the accommodations with your students, with your kids, so that they know the accommodations, and then they can say, what is this or what is that? Often, it's very difficult to understand what a certain accommodation, might be. For example, these might create a little bit of confusion for some people. Provide graphic organizers for writing that involves multiple steps and is more open-ended. Again, maybe some people understand that, but you might want to get a clarification of that, right? Wait time to formulate thoughts before answering questions. So these would be good things to say in a team meeting. How do you do this? Or how does this one get applied in your classroom? Right? So the other thing about accommodations is to look out for little statements at the end of the accommodations that state when needed, or if necessary, or if applicable, or so they're basically qualification statements. They should really be eliminated. If your student needs accommodations, they should be under all circumstances, and if they're not needed in certain circumstances, then those should be articulated, right? Because accommodations are for the regular education teachers to provide for the students, not when necessary, like the student needs to say. A lot of meetings say, well, they have to ask, or they have to. No, that's not the case. The teacher needs to know what accommodations are appropriate, not appropriate, but that are listed, and how to apply, and when to apply, and how effective they are. So it's just important. We've done some advocacy for quite a long time. Okay, and then the third is to formulate what we consider the service grids. Right? In our system, the A grid is the consultation. One of the things that happens in consultation grid, in terms of how much time consultation is given regarding a student, is it's rarely any indication anywhere about the amount of time, who the consultation was given to and from, what the content was, and these things you should request to have, because you think consultation is a good thing to be able to communicate between special ed and regular ed occasions. So the B grid are services that are delivered directly by special education personnel in the classroom. How is that done? Is there a very good way in which that's working? How many other students sometimes might be as part of that? Does my student get the amount of time that they say? Because there's a clear grid, as well as in C grid, which is the amount of time that each child gets in direct services outside, or in a special education classroom or a resource room or something of that nature. And it's all spelled out in terms of time and how much in a cycle and so on and so forth. So it's very important to kind of be familiar with that. So the first area of study is the IEP, the special plan. We all know that knowledge is power, and the more you know and the more you have questions and so on and so forth, the more involved the teachers will be. And often teachers most often, they really want to be helpful to the kids. The next document that you should review very carefully is what's called the Parent Special Education Guidance Handbook. Again, it's different in different states, but what parents often feedback to us is they had no idea that there were so many things that would be available for their child or any child. Having knowledge, even though a lot of the handbook might be related to students that don't have your child's difficulties, the parts that do, in terms of the timelines, when evaluations happen, what the expectations are, there's just a ton of really good information that's worth taking notes and being prepared for. Once you study that, you'll be good for however many years that your child is in public school, or if private schools recognize special education plan. This is fantastic. It's very good. The last document is to review the most recent test report, especially the recommendations. You want to make sure that recommendations that were in reports are actually in the IEP, because sometimes they're not. And to read the summaries of the results of the testing and see if they match the description of how a child's disabilities affects their progress in school. And so that's very, kind of important to do that. And you can underline things that you don't understand that you'd like to understand better about your child. And you can always say that these are really important things for you to understand, because you want to educate your child relative to what kinds of things are going to help them the best to be able to have the most success in school, to make sure that teachers and you and the student are all on the same page. And the last area, which is very important, is the process of the team meeting. Team meetings are often, they have many, many staff people there, the teachers, administrators, special educators. It can be very intimidating for parents. And so I always encourage people to say a couple of things. Number one, how long do we have for this meeting? Because it's not unusual that teacher presents all of their observations and there's no time left to have much of a discussion. So that you can ask the team chair, do you think we could get through the descriptions of my child's strengths and weaknesses in each of the classrooms within about a third of the time? If it's an hour, then it's a third of an hour. And then you say that if that's possible, that would be terrific, because I have some questions that I really like to understand better. And I'd like to have at least a third of the time to kind of go through the IEP and make sure that I understand this as well as I can, so that my children can understand this. And then the third part is to really go over any revisions of the IEP that's necessary. And the last thing I'll say, because I know this has been a long, and there's a lot more to say, of course. You can ask me questions. But the last thing that's really important is any meeting that you attend, official meeting, make sure that you have a follow-up meeting in about 4 weeks. Because it's really important that people that agreed to various things and changes or whatever, but you want to be able to find out how those changes are being operationalized in the classroom or at the school. And you've already hopefully been able to say that you would like suggestions and communication on what you can do and what you can be helpful with. And then some, team leaders might say, well, we just don't really, we don't do that we can't do that for parents. And the response is, you can say, I thought I understood that parents can actually ask for a team meeting anytime they want. Is that correct, or something wrong with that? That's what I understand the special education laws are about. And if it's not answered there, you can always go to the director of special education and say, listen, we had a good meeting. I'd really like very much to make sure that I get the notes of the meeting, but also to have another one to make sure we're doing well, our students doing well, and the team's doing well on the good things that we recommended. So I'm sorry this was so long, but advocacy is a tough thing. We've been doing it for years and years and years. I really like it. And so I hope that this has been helpful. And if there's any questions that you have for me, as I've mentioned in the past, please don't hesitate to send me an email. R.A. Weaver, not R.A., R. Weaver at weavercenter.org. And check out our website and see if there's some other information that you might find interesting. Anyway, thanks a lot, and I hope, as I say, that you'll feel much more competent and confident with these guidelines in terms of preparing for a team meeting. All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.